It's the Dark Reading News Desk. I'm Terry Sweeney, contributing editor with Dark Reading. I'm joined now by Andrew Rubin, CEO and founder of Illumio. Andrew, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
We're here to talk about zero trust, a major theme across the industry. Why is it having its particular moment? It's not brand new as a concept or as a paradigm for managing security, but it's hard to escape it. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, it's actually been around for a long time, and I think that's one of the things that surprises people when they spend a little bit of time trying to figure out where did this thing suddenly come from. The funny part about it is it didn't suddenly come from anywhere. It's been around for a while. I think it's having its moment for probably two reasons. One is, I think that as an industry and certainly the customer community realizes that despite massive investments of time and effort and money over the last decade, we're still experiencing these large breaches. They seem to be getting bigger and in some sense happening more often. So there's a little bit of a desire to try and put a framework around how are we going to protect ourselves going forward. I think the second reason why is because we're realizing that security is not about a point solution. It's not about a specific tool.
Right.
And there has to be some overarching framework and architecture that allows us to get on the same page about how are we going to build more secure environments and how are we going to manage the risk in those environments. And I think zero trust speaks to both those things very powerfully.
Okay, but because this term is so widely used and often overused, help us understand how you define it and how you talk to customers about it.
Sure, well, let's start with what I think it's not. It's not a product, it's not a solution, it's certainly not a vendor.
Right.
I think zero trust is, in a sense, it's an architecture or a reference architecture for how to think about managing risk. I think a little more tactically, one way to say it is, if you believe that zero trust is the correct approach to security, then you start with the premise that everything is breached or will be breached. Maybe not every asset, but every organization, every data center, every laptop community will eventually have a problem. And that problem is not necessarily the thing that you need to be focused on entirely. Preventing problems is a wonderful mission for security. Reducing attack surface and making sure problems are not catastrophic when they occur is equally valuable and maybe even more valuable if you believe zero trust says at some point everybody has a problem. So I look at it through the lens of it's a risk management and a reference architecture mindset.
Is it something that you think is appropriate for all organizations across the board?
I think every organization should treat cyber as a business risk. I think every organization, big and small, regardless of what they do for a living, should understand that risk could be catastrophic. And by the way, it's not about a number of servers or a number of laptops. It's about brand, it's about trust, it's about the relationship with your customers. And when you break those things, they are much harder to recover than a laptop that's broken into or a server that's breached. And so, yes, it should be something that every organization embraces as a way to think about security. The implementation of it, figuring out how to take that reference architecture and implement it, that's probably something that organizations are going to do over time, and they're going to do it differently based on their needs.
Okay. In tandem with zero trust is, of course, cloud computing and cloud applications. How well does zero trust and cloud dance together? Is it well designed to align with cloud? How do you view that?
Well, I'd like to think, and I'll actually answer it wearing my CEO hat for a moment in terms of thinking about risk to Illumio as an organization. I don't think of cloud as being in conflict or in any sense promoting zero trust. I think zero trust is a mindset around, I want to reduce risk. I'd love to never have a problem. When I do, I don't want it to be catastrophic. And whether my servers are running in AWS or Azure or they're running in my data center or my colo facility shouldn't affect how I think about that risk and the impact it could have on my organization.
A big theme here at RSA, as you know, is the human element, and with regard to the perspective that humans introduce to the entire security equation. Is there a connection between the human element and the whole zero trust conversation?
You can make a very literal connection and say that the human being sitting in front of the server or administering the server or sitting in front of the laptop and typing on it is the attack vector. In some sense, it starts and ends with us. If the computers just sat there and nobody ever touched them or did anything with them, there probably wouldn't be as many problems. But what's interesting about it, and when I heard that the human element is going to be the theme of RSA this year, I sort of had a different view. I think it's obvious that what we do and the things that we click on and download obviously introduce risk and are attack vectors into organizations. That's a fact. Nobody should argue with it. But if you flip it around, there is no security without the human element. Human beings have to decide that this is a priority. They have to instrument and implement the tools that help us to secure the environments. So in a very weird and somewhat ironic twist, the human element that introduces the risk is also the exact same thing that we're relying on in order to manage that risk and secure these environments. And one of the things that we say at Illumio often is that buying the software or buying the tool is the easy part. Operationalizing it and getting the organization to use it the right way is actually where all of the value comes from. And that's all about the human beings.
You're right. A dark side of the human element, though, is the insider threat, which continues to be a problem despite how many great efforts to combat it. What's up there?
So I do think that's where Zero Trust collides with the human element in sort of the sense of attack vector. So the insider threat, somebody who has access, has credentials, is sitting there, has the ability to do things to you from the inside. The Zero Trust mindset would say that shouldn't be a surprise. That should be an attack vector that you've already thought about, not because this person is good or bad, but simply because we're going to start from the mindset that everything could be breached, that everything will have a problem. And so it almost removes the differentiation of insider threat versus external threat.
Okay.
And it simply says there will be these problems, and we have to think about how to secure our infrastructure, our network, our applications, our endpoints. We have to think about how to secure them under the premise that these problems will exist. And I don't want to say that it's irrelevant where they come from, but there is no doubt about it that if you have a zero trust mindset, you believe these problems are going to happen again and again, and you build your security framework to account for that.
So what are some early steps, some initial steps that an organization can take to start initiating a zero trust strategy?
Well, I said earlier that I believe, and I think that one of the things that the industry and the customer community is finding common ground on is that there won't be a vendor or a specific security control or a tool that's going to sort of let you check the zero trust box. That's not how this works. But I will say that I think there is agreement that there are certain security controls that are going to play a very prominent role in zero trust. And the one common thematic through all of these breaches that we've all either read about or unfortunately participated in is that lateral movement, either from one laptop to the next or from one server or workload to the next, the ability to get inside and then move through the environment without being detected or stopped, that lateral movement is a key exploit for every single one of these breaches. And so I believe that we're hearing more and more around zero trust and stopping lateral movement being very closely linked together. The ability to find something before it has its time to move around is a key component of zero trust.
Talk about Illumio's foundational role in zero trust.
So Illumio is a segmentation company in every sense of the word. What we do for our customers is we really do two things. We build a visual map that allows them to see all these assets they have, workloads running in the data center, what applications and environments are running on them and where they sit, and most importantly, how they're all connected and talking to each other. That map is a key component of zero trust because it allows you to see things connected to one another and be able to differentiate whether that's a good or bad thing. The other thing we do for our customers is inevitably once you see the map, you have that moment where you realize there are things talking to each other that shouldn't be. And through a series of policies, we can segment or control what should and should not talk to each other. That's all about lateral movement. The visibility to see it and the policy to control it. And we believe that that will be one of the core foundational elements of zero trust.
Wow, some great insights onto zero trust as a security strategy. Thanks so much for joining us on News Desk today.
Thank you for having me.
We've been talking with Andrew Rubin from Illumio. This has been Terry Sweeney for Dark Reading News Desk. Thanks for joining us today.